I'm Nick Taliaferro, and on this Founders Day, you know, the word founders makes everyone think of older people, and so they said, who do we have that's old and still halfway breathing? And I got the nod, and I'm really glad that I can be here. This is going to be one of the most enjoyable on-air sessions that we have ever had, because it brings together the entire daily lineup plus some. You get an opportunity to hear from and see all of our star-studded radio hosts. They'll be able to share with you, and I want to get out of the way as quickly as I can as I introduce the topic for today. And you cannot talk about our founder, Dr. Walter P. Lomax, Jr., and not talk about health, which we just did, and then not follow it up with media. Dr. Walter P. Lomax was dedicated to the idea of having free and independent black voices throughout the country, particularly where he lives. And because of that commitment, WURD exists. And before we go any further, can we please applaud the legacy and the commitment of our founder, Dr. Walter P. Lomax, Jr., for making this all possible, his family, and all of those who are connected with him. The topic for our conversation this afternoon is the role of independent black media in the age of Donald J. Trump. Say it with me, everyone. I am a citizen of the United States, and Donald Trump is my president. Okay, so much for that. Well, the brain trust of WURD thought it would be good to bring together all of the hosts to talk about the role of independent black media in the age of Trump. And without any further ado, let me introduce them to you from the furthest to the nearest to me. If you would be so kind to turn your attention to the right, at the end of the table is the newest member of the WURD daily broadcast team. Get up off his phone at some point. Here's a gentleman who has dedicated himself to media and to excellence in reporting. Starting as a Tribune correspondent, he has lent his talents to Huffington Post, Politico.com, and he is now the host of Reality Check. Please welcome Mr. Charles Ellison. Yes, indeed. And I want to make sure that I'm looking down the row right. She is, ladies and gentlemen, the woman who is the grand doyen of art for WURD. She happens to be a contributor over a wide number of platforms when it comes to art, including being a vocalist, a voiceover artist, an actress, an educator, but you know her best as the fine host of The Mojo. Please give it up for Miss Steph Renee. I was the oldest host, and now I get an opportunity to introduce the youngest host. He is Pittsburgh-born but Philly-educated, graduate of Temple University, where he served as one of the commentators on their radio station, WHIP, as well as their television station. He now hosts the evening nightlight known as The Lounge. Please, let's welcome Mr. Keaton Nichols. This gentleman is he does it all. He's an author. He is a journalist, writing a column for the Philadelphia Daily News. He is a contributor to electronic media on television, contributing often to Nancy Grace and to public radio on WHYY. But he starts our day off in the full-time format. Please, to give it up for the man who made Shaft call himself Shaft Jr., Mr. Solomon Jones. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a gentleman who's a dear friend. My radio program was going down so quickly, they said, you need help. And they went out and they found a man who has a congenial and agreeable spirit to almost all things. He is an adjunct professor at the University of Penn, a senior consultant for Root Cause, and he is also the host of Friday afternoons, continually agitating, always stirring it up, Shamari Show. Give it up, ladies and gentlemen, for Eric Shamari Grimes. She is the Grand Duchess of black media in the city of Philadelphia. There is no black media in Philadelphia that has not benefited from her touch. She writes for The Scoop. She has written for other news outlets as well. She has hosted on every black radio station in the city of Philadelphia. She starts our day off with Daybreak. Please make welcome Thera Martin. And last but not least on our panel is a gentleman who asked the hardest questions to I remember one time he told one person who was an elected official, "You're lying." I could not believe he did it.
He was.
He is one of the bravest reporters you will find, a veteran reporter, also a public servant for the city of Philadelphia, having worked for the Philadelphia School District as their public information officer. He now hosts a program that makes City Council sing, City Council Live. My former producer, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Vince Thompson. This is it, folks. To my right, of course, is the king of all research, who's engineering all of this, Mr. Troy Wilmore. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this party started. We are ready to rumble indeed. I don't know how we are going to slow this train down when we get it started, but the idea is to talk about the role of independent black media in the age of Donald Trump. Why don't we start it off with the first full host in the morning, Mr. Solomon Jones. The birth of black media was started and precipitated by the need to have black voices and black perspectives on air and in print and et cetera. But now that there are black journalists all throughout the pantheon of journalism, we've got black journalists now on national television, black journalists in print, we have black journalists on air. Even yourself, Solomon, you contribute in a variety of different ways. Many people are saying, what is the unique task now for black radio now that you have so many black journalists scattered throughout of all of media?
Well, I would start with the task of black media, period. I think our task has always been to tell our stories in our voices for our benefit. That is the task of black media, and I think that is the task that we have during a time of fake news, during a time of a lying president, during a time when black people are under attack.
Did you say a lying president?
A lying president, yeah. Not a sitting president, a lying president.
Okay.
And so I think that in order for us to really understand our role now, it's best for us to kind of look back at what our role has traditionally been and how that role has played out. Because while Dr. Lomax was able to gather some resources, was able to accumulate some wealth, was able to use that wealth for the benefit of our community, originally when black journalists started out, they didn't have that type of resource because they didn't have that type of opportunity. And so when you look back at a paper like the Chicago Defender, where you had a guy named Robert Abbott, the son of former slaves, started in 1905 with 25 cents, wow, right? And 300 copies, and then make that paper into a resource that became the largest circulation black newspaper at that time. The first black newspaper to go over 100,000 in circulation, starting with just a quarter in his pocket. What's our excuse? And he did it in 1905 when black people were just a few decades out of slavery, and really used that paper as a vehicle to shepherd black people through the difficulty that they were experiencing then. So the Great Migration doesn't happen without the Chicago Defender. And the Chicago Defender was so powerful, what you have to understand is that they had to smuggle it into the South because the Ku Klux Klan would kill you if they found you with it, because of the type of information that they had in the Chicago Defender. And so they would smuggle it down with the Pullman porters. They would smuggle it down with black entertainers, and they used it to really fuel the Great Migration that brought black people out of the segregation, out of the Jim Crow of the South, and brought them to more opportunity in the North. Now, granted, still racism in the North, but they had more opportunity. And so that was fueled by the Chicago Defender. Anti-lynching campaigns fueled by papers like the Chicago Defender, the Philadelphia Tribune. And so our role now is to do the same thing that they did then, but with greater resources. Attack the problems that we're facing in an administration that's really targeting black people. Forget about the tweets. We too busy looking at what he's saying on Twitter. Look at his policies, right? If we look at his policies, we are being targeted by this administration. And so our role is to do the same thing that they did then, to empower and inform black people so that they could move with the information that we provide.
Got you. Just so that we can inform everyone as to what we're doing, just to get ourselves started, I'm going to be posing a question to each of our panelists so that we can make sure that we can get their voice up on stage early. And then after that, it's going to be a free-for-all. A verbal Donnybrook. We'll be standing on the table, tossing things at each other, grabbing each other by the collar, and it'll be sort of like the Game of Thrones microphone style. Okay, I see many people haven't watched that show yet. Let's continue on with it. Thera, let's just step a couple over from Solomon. You're a veteran broadcaster, and you can recall when black media was the de facto way to catalyze the black community. In other words, if something needed to be done in the black community, black radio stations, black print, maybe not so much television because we didn't have a lot of television stations, but black media did it. That was how you mobilized the black community. Does black media still fill that role today, or has it shifted to social media? What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, that's a really tough question, but one I think I can answer for you. But first, let me say, long live the memory of Dr. Walter P. Lomax, our founder. Long live his
Absolutely.
memory and his legacy. Were it not for that man, none of us would be sitting here in a setting quite like this today. So thank God for him. I also want to recognize the fact that my president has entered the room, and that's the president of the Philadelphia branch NAACP, Minister Rodney Muhammad.
There it is, ladies and
I wanted to recognize him. I wanted to recognize him. As for black radio and what we're doing today, and if we're doing it right, I like to think that at WURD, we are doing it right. Are we perfect? No, because I haven't met anything perfect yet, but I think we've come a long way.
You're sitting right next to Eric Grimes there.
We've come a long way. We have come a long way in radio to get to the point where we are today, where we have not only an AM station, but an FM too, where we're utilizing our internet to talk to the world. So it's a lot bigger than what radio used to be. But the question on a mainstream basis across the country, looking at black radio, where are we? Are we doing the right thing? I don't get to listen to every black radio station. I wish that I could, but because of the internet, I do pop around and check out what some of the other stations are doing, and I'm hearing relevant conversations, important and critical information. So I think that most of us are on track at these various black-owned radio stations. However, the reality is that out of over 10,000 radio stations in the country right now, only 1%, according to the research that I came up with, are black-owned. Only 1%. So that puts the demand on us to do better that much more. I also know that as we continue to look at black media, we have to know that the owners of these stations and that the managers of these stations are socially conscious and achievement focused and culturally aware owners and managers, because if they're not, we're going to lose this game. We have to have leadership that understands that we got to be proud of who we are and where we come from, that we've got to know our history, to know where we're going, and we got to put that kind of information on the air continuously. So I see movement. I see things are better today, certainly, than when I came into the broadcast arena 36 years ago. We've grown. We've grown a lot in 36 years, but we're still not yet where we need to be.
Thera started when she was only 6 years old,
Right?
incidentally.
You got that right.
6 years old. I'm going to bring that question back about catalyzing, because we want to know if black media is still, and we'll bring it to the whole panel later. Are we still able to mobilize like we used to? In the old days, some of you might remember, if Georgie Woods was on there and said, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, we did X, Y, and Z. I'm wondering if it still has that kind of effect. But we want to go all the way down to the other end of the table now, to a gentleman who works at Ground Zero in Washington, D.C., at the seat of American politics, and ask him whether or not black media is being taken seriously by the power elite. Charles Ellison, you have worked over a variety of different formats when it comes to news, and there was a time when black media was sort of feared. They knew that they had to come our way in order to at least speak to our people. But is black media still considered to be a power broker at the seat of the beast in Washington, D.C. and other places where the big heads come together?
You know, it depends on who you ask, and it also depends on how we, as a people in this room, and also we as a people collectively in our respective communities, define black media and what our expectations are of black media. I can tell you that there are some folks in power centers like Washington, D.C., who do still respect the traditional role that black media has played for a very long time. As an empowerment tool, also as a mechanism to uplift communities and uplift our people to fulfill that obligation that it's had towards sort of getting us to that land of milk and honey, so to speak, and and reaching greener pastures. So, I mean, you have that set of folks in DC who do respect black media as that, but then you also have that set of especially black elected officials who tend to consider black media as their cheerleaders, and that's it, and not fulfilling that role or fulfilling that obligation. I mean, in terms of black radio, 95, this is from Nielsen. Nielsen is the organization that tracks audiences and what audiences listen to and read, and what types of, and the type of television or how much television they view. And 95% of black people still rely on radio as their primary source of intelligence and information. So that's pretty significant. And you take a mainstream organization like Nielsen and you compare it to something like the census, and they're always undercounting us. So it's probably like 100% of black folks rely on radio as their primary vehicle or mode of intelligence or information gathering. So that's significant. So that means that black radio is still playing a significant role. That means that black media is still very central to our condition and our fate and our future as a people collectively. What I noticed in terms of black media's relevancy today, there are a few challenges there. I mean, one is that we live in a very crowded technological space. There's a lot of noise, a lot of white noise, a lot of static, and it's hard breaking through that, particularly with social media and being heard and getting your point across or ensuring that your agenda is on the front burner. Another thing that I think is very tragic and unfortunate, whereas black media is still a force, especially with an organization like a WURD or other platforms like the platform I write for, the Philadelphia Tribune, is that too much of black media is more engaged in self-branding than in community empowerment. And I think that that's very tragic, particularly in these very urgent times that we live in right now. So you have a situation here where you have a multitude of black voices and black media institutions and black media platforms. There's countless numbers of them, and you see them on social media, on Facebook and Twitter. But folks seem to be more concerned about their own personal brands than they are about, trying to truly uplift their people or to how to, give them a plan or a blueprint on how to maneuver these very tough times that we live in. I think that's very unfortunate and tragic. But on the upside, we have a situation now in the 21st century where we have all of these resources and technological tools and mechanisms at our disposal that we never had at our disposal before. I mean, it's a very wonderful landscape that we have now that still helps me maintain a degree of optimism now that maybe my parents and my grandparents and my ancestors didn't have over the past several hundred years. So there is a real big moment here for us to take advantage of a major opportunity. I mean, out of these challenges, there's a major opportunity. It's just a matter of resetting our expectations and also forcing those who claim to represent us to also change their expectations of what they want black media to do. So I think that reset has to happen, and I think one of the interesting things that's happening right now in the period that we live in now is that reset is happening as we speak.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. Let me take a moment to reintroduce what we are doing and who we are. You're listening to WURD Radio, broadcasting live from the Free Library in the beautiful Skyline Room. This is WURD's Founders Day, where we celebrate our founder, Dr. Walter P. Lomax, Jr., and we celebrate his legacy, and we're speaking about the topic, the role of independent black media in the age of Trump. If you have ever listened to the Mojo, then you have probably gone out and bought music because of what you heard Steph Renee play. I have personally, I can't listen without buying 2 or 3 songs every week. Steph Renee, you promote art better than anybody else in the city. There was a time when black media was in the vanguard of promoting black arts and black entertainment, and black arts and black entertainment would in return support black media. But nowadays, black media will go to other media, black arts and entertainment will go to other media outlets. I ask you the question, first of all, is that relationship broken? Secondly, how can we repair it if it is broken? And thirdly, do we have a duty, whether or not black arts and entertainment, whether or not they support black media, do we have a duty to keep pushing it because that's a part of our raison d'etre?
Yes, indeed. Well, I mean, that's a multi-layer question, and I think the people who are of a certain age in this room remember a term that we used to hear very frequently in referring to the music industry, which is artist and repertoire. You remember that? A&R? And there was a profound shifting in the music industry from people who were musicians, who understood music and groomed the next generation of musicians, to it becoming a business model. And therefore, business people were deciding how the music was going to continue and be delivered to people. And it shifted the way we listen. It shifted the priorities that we had in our educational system about whether we were actually teaching our young people to be musicians or whether we were teaching them how to understand more of the business of show business, and then, you know, by default, leaving more of the show behind, which is an incredible thing when you think about how our culture has evolved over the years, how it was illegal at one point for us to play drums, and now we don't even understand the role of drums, yet that's something we demand from our music, it being programmed and served to us. So there's a lot of conversation about how artists, people who still wanted to be creative, had to retool themselves in order to survive in this industry because they had to protect the rights of their creativity against this hot rotation kind of format that we were force-fed through commercial radio, and begin to commodify themselves in a way that they didn't formally concern themselves with a whole lot, because there was an artist and repertoire department. There were people in these record labels that were protecting their interests and what they were gifting to the world. So what we lost in that transition, as Nick so eloquently laid out for us, is this idea that you had to support the radio stations that built your careers, because you had a completely different relationship with the on-air personalities, with the record labels, with the radio industry itself, because now everybody was dollars and cents. Very little was being discussed about the cultural connectivity, the idea of the role that black radio plays and why it's so essential to continue to support it. So I think, you know, one of the reasons why I live and breathe music. And so there was no way I was going to be able to, even on a talk radio station, have a show that didn't talk about that relationship. But we need more of those of you who appreciate the music to connect directly with the artists whose music you respect and that you have some demands of for how they're carrying on these traditions, and communicate to them, if black radio is important to you, as I know it is, that you have some expectations of them about how they're supposed to interact with stations like WURD or just black radio overall, in order to keep those traditions going. Because if we want them to perpetuate our cultural legacy through their artistry, and that's what you connect to, then they've got to understand the responsibility for the teams as they're building them now, managing their social media, telling them how they're supposed to interact with fans and what have you, to build that kind of respect and reciprocity into their overall marketing plan. A lot of them aren't doing it because they're being neglectful. A lot of them aren't doing it because they don't know. They never had to be in charge of it, and so it's not a priority for them as they're building their perspective for what their career is going to look like moving forward. And we as artists have to show up, as patrons, have to show up for the artists with our dollars. If we tell them that we're supporting their music because we care about what they do and we see it as valuable, then we want them to turn those dollars we're giving them into support of Black radio and continue to build this back up to what it should be. The relationship can exist without the major labels the way they once did, without the A&R departments the way they once did. Now this is a direct one-on-one. I'm taking care of you. Now you take care of the system, and it works for everybody.
Thank you, madam. Appreciate that. Well said, well said. Well said. Shift a little bit here. The gentleman who was very congenial and very agreeable to almost everything, Eric Grimes. When you talk about Black radio, of course.
Better leave me alone.
When you talk about Black radio, I mean, I guess it's according to how one would define blackness, but there was a time when Black radio was unapologetically, almost kind of in your face in many ways. And now many people are saying that because we are a bit more homogenized in our society, that Black radio has lost a bit of its, to borrow a word from Stephanie, mojo, that we aren't quite as strident as we once were. From your perspective, you travel the country a lot. From your perspective, has Black radio lost a bit of its mojo, a little bit of its fire, or are we on course from Shamari's point of view?
From my point of view, the word "a little bit" is an understatement. To me, the trade-off has been we have a lot of blacks in media, and we have very little Black media. So there's a trade-off there. There's a cost to that. There's a cost to incorporation and assimilation, and we never get that message. So the cost is always at the expense of our institutions. And see, the importance of this is that people learn through media now. We used to learn through school. We used to learn at mama and daddy's knee. Yes. We used to learn in church or at the mosque. We learn. Our education is media now. Mm-hmm. So the media is educating our people. Yep. And the question, and we know the answer, is into what? Mm-hmm. So at the trade-off of many Black journalists, Black people in media working all of these places, I mean, I just came back from New York, literally just got off the train from the UNIA convention to come here. Mm-hmm. Because we have to resurrect the Garvey's voice. We have to resurrect, when we talk about Black media, we forget that the Negro world probably had the largest international distribution of Black media, right? We forget that media for us has always and often been attached to our institution. I saw Brother Rodney Muhammad walk in here, and I think that's a final call in his hand. And so when we talk about Black media, we forget that.
If it ain't, don't show it to us, Rodney.
We forget and must remember that if we're going to resurrect our learning through the media, we have to have, and I'm going to use my word, audacity. We have to have the audacity that Marcus Garvey and Honorable Elijah Muhammad had in creating those types of media. The counter-public space, not the assimilated, incorporated space. This, I'm sorry, no offense to my leader, I refuse to acknowledge this as the age of Trump. The Black media has to be responsible enough to say, the age, maybe Aquarius gets an age, maybe Ma'at gets an age, but hell if Donald J. Trump is going to get an age under my watch later for that.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. You'll be getting a little bit more of that as we go forward. Speaking of asking tough questions, joining us now right beside me is a gentleman who I've heard ask some of the toughest questions to all sorts of people in the news. You were part of the NABJ, Vince, and they just honored April Ryan with the Journalist of the Year. For those of you who may remember, if you ever watch a press conference, African-American woman asking some very tough questions to one of the few. She has very tough questions.
In the whole room.
And as a result of that, sometimes she gets shut out. Mm-hmm. Because when you ask tough questions, sometimes they make you an outsider. You ask those kind of tough questions. Is black media shut out many times because of the position that they have to take in asking tough and unfriendly questions to the powers that be?
Black media is shut out because powers that be don't think that we're important until we punch them in the face and show them we are. That's our job. And that's why April got Journalist of the Year. Our job is to, and you know, Solomon does it well on the morning show. Our job is to ask questions of people that we are their bosses. Every time I do City Council Live, all 17 members of council, I pay their salary. They don't pay mine. And I can't, for the life, you know, Philadelphia has 47% African American. So everything that happens in Philly impacts the black community. From potholes to gentrification, to what's happening with the Rizzo statue, to whether we're moved out for Made in America, everything impacts us. And I'm not going to give Darryl Clark a pass. I'm not going to give Janie a pass. But I can tell you this. I'm not, you know I didn't give Michael no pass. But, you know, that's our job. And one of our jobs has always been in the black, you know, one of the things that sometimes we do a bad job as the black press is to believe the okey doke of some black leaders. Because some black elected officials are worse for black folks. And they should have been gone a long time ago.
Would you like to name names, sir? Or
I'm not going to name names, but you know what districts they're in.
Yeah, let's make it fun.
But I mean, I think that is our job. And in this age of Trump, I tell people all the time, when Trump says something, look at what he's doing behind you. Right? Right? You know, when you're looking at the change of the Affordable Care Act, he might not kill it with legislation, but he's going to kill it by having the Health and Human Services Secretary basically starve it of funding and choke it so it doesn't exist. So if you have an interest, I've said this before, I had the privilege of being the chief of staff to Juan Ramos. And I learned a lot about government, and I learned a lot about how if black people and Latino people came together, there is nothing that can stop us. Because I'm sorry, Don can build the highest wall he wants to. There's going to be somebody that's finding a way around that wall. They're going to blow up the wall. They're going to swim around the wall. They're going to create a fence around the wall. They're going to do something. So in this day and age, we have to be willing to ask elected officials, no matter who they are, local, state, federal, what does it mean to black people? I love working at a radio station where I know every morning I look at a newscast and say, what does it mean to black people? That's my first question to Jim Kenney. I don't care what Jim's talking about. What do it mean to black, Jim? You know, hey, Jim, you're announcing the NFL draft. What do it mean for black people, Jim? Hey, Jim, I got a question to ask you. Rizzo statue. Yeah, okay, what does it mean for black people, Jim? And it's empowering. It's liberating. I can tell you, our white reporter friends, they are jealous of me being able to do that. And I don't care if I take up a press conference with that. 47% of the city. So I urge people to really stay active. And also I urge people, and we say this all the time, elections matter. They matter. You are right now as a result of people not voting. You know, I saw a statistic before we started. 1 out of every 10 Bernie Sanders voter voted for Donald Trump. You want to know why Donald Trump's in the White House? Because Bernie Sanders people helped put him in. Black folks didn't put him in. It was white folks who longed for another day, longed to make America great again, not like America ever wasn't great or had lost its shine. And there were some disaffected people. We were lucky at being one of the only black radio stations to cover the Republican convention. You know the reason I wanted to cover the Republican convention? Because if you're not there at the party, you don't know what the heck is going on. And it was my job to tell you what was going on. And let the record show, URD told you that those folks were going to come out and vote for him. I said it before. Republicans can't stand Donald Trump, but they couldn't stand Hillary. They would have voted for a potted plant before they voted for Hillary Clinton.
They did.
So I just urge people in this day and age, you know, support the shows. Make sure that you become a forward member. Understand that what you have in Philly, you don't have around the country.
That's true.
That is very true.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen, making white reporters jealous all around the city, Mr. Vince Thompson.
I've been making them jealous since 1966.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, bringing up the rear, the only one here on this panel under the age of 30, I know no matter what you think, I'm a little over 30, is a gentleman who is our key to finding out how to reach this new millennial age in this new digital age. There was a time, Keaton, when people were very loyal to black media. If they were black people, they were loyal to their media. I need to ask the question, folks in your age group, the millennial age group, are they loyal to black media? Are they loyal to anything, really? Are they loyal to black media?
Loyalty to anything would be impressive.
Yeah, and where do we stand? Where does a station like WURD stand with people in that general age group?
That's an interesting question. The loyalty thing is the most important thing because, as I say all the time, we as millennials, I'm not proud of this, but we are not loyal to anything. Not at all.
Did you hear that, Mrs. Nichols?
Who doesn't exist yet. But anyway, no, I think the loyalty aspect is important here because right now, like we talk about the online communities that have been formed and the discussions and stuff like Black Twitter and all this other stuff, these discussions that we've had, in a sense, to a new generation that hasn't been loyal to anything, including some of the bad things that the community has been loyal to in the past. We've allowed ourselves to kind of create new spaces and sort of new patterns of thought. And I think, a big part of what my role is, because I love history. That's why me and Solomon work so well together. I love history, and I love being able to connect and tie different ideas of what happened in the past to what's happening now, because I think we should move on. I think we should evolve from things. But we can't forget where we came from. You can't evolve from something unless you start from something else, right? A butterfly doesn't pop out of nowhere. It starts from something else and it evolves. But if it stays that worm or whatever its entire life, or caterpillar, its entire life, you would consider that to be a disappointment, even though there's nothing wrong with caterpillars. But, there's butterflies. And, I think a lot of us are kind of loyal to the idea of being butterflies. We don't want to stay caterpillars. And so kind of understanding where WURD is, and other black media as well, in that since we're not loyal to this concept, we're loyal to the concept of being black and of recognizing our blackness and what that means in society. Do we have the natural connection as millennials, to be honest, that our parents did and our grandparents did to black media? Absolutely not. I'd be lying if I said that we as millennials love black media. We don't love really any media. We love social media. We love that one. But social media is a conglomeration of a bunch of different concepts and ideas. Thankfully, I think we as millennials have been able to organize in such a way that when I tell people about WURD, young people, right, millennials about WURD, they're like, whoa, where has this been my whole life? Where has this concept sort of been? So in many ways, shapes, and forms, because of the digital divide and the way that we've leapt up, our generation has leapt ahead in technology and all types of other stuff. Sometimes there has to be some folks who, that's why I appreciate my elders here, who especially give me so much support in what I do. We got to sit down and have conversations with them to say, wait a minute, I know how things are in 2017, but what was it like in 1986? What was that like in 1979? What was that? And seriously, we don't know. We can look on the internet what happened in 1986, and I can tell you every major historical event that happened in 1986. But unless I understand from somebody who has been there and understands the concept of where we have gone since 1986, not just what happened in 1986, until we sort of get that concept as a whole, which I think everyone can work on, I don't think we're going to be there. But in terms of what we're doing now, I would encourage a lot of folks to check out what we've got online right now. We have a website that's really thoroughly robust with, podcasts and episodes, special videos. Steph Renee goes backstage at events and things like that. Solomon Jones writes a great piece every day on the site where you get the top news or compiles a top news and stuff. We stream every show pretty much live from Facebook. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but now you know, right? There are definitely different outlets for that. And I think the ideas are probably a lot closer than what we, originally think right now. I think working on building those very short bridges across from millennials to older generations that can help us with those concepts and understanding how we grow is very important.
You know what's really funny? You know you're really old when someone starts talking about 1986 as history. And
I wasn't even born in 1986. I wasn't even around in 1986.
I figured that would be coming next. I mean,
what is the 80s? I have no idea.
Feels like yesterday to some of us up here. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. You have just covered the entire span of WURD's stellar host panel. Please give them all a round of applause. And we want to really get into it now, because we wanted to ask each one of them a question to give them an opportunity to get their voice out there on this panel. All of them could do the entire show by themselves, but now we're going to do some jump balls, ask some questions, put them up in the air, and see whether or not they would like to answer one another, ask questions to one another, and last but not least, toward the end of this program, we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions to our host, so you get an opportunity to go tete-a-tete, mano a mano with the greatest host in the city of Philadelphia. Let me just ask this question, all of you, and anybody can answer, and that is, are there things that you will say on WURD as a host that you would not say on a station that is not black-owned and not operating from the black perspective? Is there any, do you ever find yourself saying things on WURD that you wouldn't say on another outlet?
Well, first of all, I'd like to jump in and say, after having worked in African-American media for so many years.
And when you jump in, please let everybody know, the listeners know who's talking there.
Thera Martin on the air right now. And after having worked in black media for so many years, there's just no other media where I would really want to be. I just have to tell you that. There's no other station in this town that I would want to go to. And certainly there have been a couple of times in my career where I had to sit out for a minute for whatever reason. I believe it was because God wanted me to be still. He wanted me to think. He wanted me to reflect. He wanted me to get stronger and grow in some other areas so I could bring back my new knowledge to WURD. But, you know, we have to be very, very careful with how we do things and the information that we have. And we're at such a critical point in time. You mentioned a little earlier about elections and how important elections are and that we get involved and that we get engaged. I also want to point out how important access is. And so when I think about WURD, for example, this coming Sunday, we will have the governor of Pennsylvania on the air live with Michael Cord, Esquire, talking about what Cheney University and how we can turn that thing around, you know? And that took a lot of work and leadership, and a part of that came out of WURD and Michael Cord and some other folks who are alumni of Cheney University who used the WURD microphones to build on that forum and to fight for Cheney to keep it alive. You know, we have the mayor who comes on regularly on WURD. You won't hear that at every radio station in this town. So I think access is important. Talking about Vincent and how he goes down to City Hall and wheels and deals, an African-American journalist and broadcaster and reporter. He has access, and so the access is important, and elections are important too.
Okay.
So
well said.
So this is Shamari, and you know that question is interesting from where I sit for me, because the answer for me is actually the opposite. You know what I talk about and what I do, I actually find myself having to modify because I'm a host and I have a particular responsibility to the station, to the people who listen to me, who might act based on what I'm saying. And I also, to be honest with you, know that what I particularly say and do is not advertiser, funder, politician friendly.
No,
right?
no.
No, but I mean, I need you to understand that. So I carry that burden every time I do my little 3 hours every week because I understand that I have to be true to what I believe and true to what I believe many people believe. But I can't cost the station because it's our arc. It's what we have in this space. And so I find myself having to do gymnastics about how I articulate my truth without costing all these people up here anything. And so that's why this thing is important because, you know, we don't understand. And when I tell you about traveling the country and everybody being envious of the fact, I mean, I was just in New York. People they asked me the same question 10 times. You mean there's a black-owned commercial talk station that lets you talk like you just talked? Like literally, people can't fathom this. We don't. Again, we take it for granted because we're here. We don't get that this is rare. And so when we began to think about our obligation, about what we're saying with this platform, what we're doing with this platform, it is serious because, like I said, this is how we're educating our people. People will sit on their hands or hit the streets. They will vote or not vote. They will spend money or not spend money. I'm looking around this room right now. There are people in this room who I see at least 3 or 4 times a week because we're in other things building community together as a result of the platform that's on this station. So this is a real thing here that we're doing, and you know, at least for me, every time I speak, I have to figure out how do I speak into the context that stays true to what we're about, but doesn't cost the radio station its potential to exist.
So this is Solomon Jones, and I'm on a lot of different platforms. Right. I've been successful as a journalist and as an author. I don't say that often, but it's just the truth. And so I appreciate.
Let me say it for you, Solomon. This man has been successful.
Right?
What, is it 7 books, Solomon?
10.
10 books. 10 books.
So
that's 10 more books than I've written.
And it's been a lot of hard work, and there's been a lot of different experiences in different mediums. I've written for Philadelphia Magazine, the Philadelphia Weekly, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Philadelphia Daily News. My work is published across the country every week. And so what I will say to you is this, that no, there isn't anything that I would say on WURD that I would not say on another platform. I know that there are some limits to what we should say. I know that we have some responsibility in what we should say, because again, I agree with you, Samari, people will go out and act based on what I say. And so I understand that I have an important platform, but when I was on CNN about a week ago, they said, well, Solomon, can you tell us about the president's tweets? And I said, let's talk about white supremacy. I ain't trying to hear it. And what the president has done to promote white supremacy. I would say the very same thing on WURD, and I try to be responsible wherever I go for whatever I say, and I know that when I say it, that there are going to be people who are angry that I have the right to say it, angry that I have the guts to say it, angry that I'm in a position to say it. Last week in the Philadelphia Daily News, I wrote this: Frank Rizzo was both the symbol and the substance of a racist system upheld by law enforcement. His police force was used to maintain racial boundaries that kept blacks trapped in redline communities, locked into a segregated educational system, and mired in the ongoing morass of second-class citizenship. That's the same thing I would say on WURD. And it's because I feel like, if I've been given this platform, my wife said something to me the day that I came on WURD radio. She said, be strong and very courageous. And it set me free. Because she took it straight out of the book of Jeremiah. It set me free. Because it allowed me to, you know what? If you're going to be here, you might as well be everything that you've been called to be. Everything. Right? And so... And I got a chance to test that because the first person that I had to interview was my former boss, Shaka Fatah. And I don't know if any of you remember that interview.
I do.
But I asked him the questions.
You were strong and very courageous.
I was strong and very courageous, right? So I asked him the same questions that I would ask anybody else. I will say this, and I've been on many platforms, and I appreciate the fact that I'm on those platforms, but I do not assimilate. I do not try to be white. I do not try to be anybody other than I am, because no matter how I walk, no matter how I talk, no matter how I act, the standard for them is whiteness. So I might as well go ahead and be me. I might as well go ahead and be who I am. And so I appreciate WURD, and I appreciate the platform that we have here, because it is so critically important to our people.
Wow. Well, that reminds me, my mother said something to me when I first went on air. She said, boy, don't embarrass me. Hey, all right, we'll wave a magic wand right now.
It didn't work.
Only Shamari. We'll wave a magic wand. Martin Luther King's dream comes true. There's equality all over the land. We're joining hands and we are singing songs of unity as rainbows emit themselves from our ears.
Did you fall on your head, Nick?
It's a beautiful world out
Did you
there.
fall on your head?
There is no more discrimination. There is no more inequality. Do you still need black, independent-owned radio?
Yes.
Vincent Thompson, yes. Because that's a pipe dream.
I'm just asking a question.
Yes.
Let me feel your head, because that is an element. That's not going to happen.
All right,
We need us more than ever.
Tell us why. I mean, if everybody is singing songs of harmony and the world is in peace, tell me why we still need it.
I'll jump in here because I'll talk from the idea of our role in terms of empowering what we have generalized throughout society as marginalized communities. There are still places and spaces that even us as ever actualizing black folks don't like to go. And I'll use my Monday 11 a.m. segment as one example of that. We bring together a married lesbian ministerial couple on the air to talk about their relationship, to talk about their work with the organizations that they do, and how they navigate this world. And we have a lot of people that have been very supportive of that conversation, and a lot of people that, you know, kind of either whisper to me through email or back channel on Facebook or all these other things like, Stephanie, why do you go there? It's because we must. This is our reality in our world. And so this kumbaya scenario that you've just designed for us, I don't think a lot of people can even envision it. Because even within a place where we say we shall overcome and we say we mean black people, there's some black people that operate outside of the sphere of what we're comfortable calling blackness, that we are not necessarily ready to link up arms or hands with and bring with us into this new actualized space. And so I think we have a lot of opportunity to question how our blackness is evolving to really be radically welcome, as one term that they've taught me, that we discuss very often on that segment, about how we are envisioning what overcoming looks like in 2017 and beyond, because it has shifted a bit from what it might have looked like in 65, 68, 70 in our, you know, Black is Beautiful movement. And we've got to continually question, what are we questing for? Sarah challenged us when I first joined the staff of WURD to constantly ask, what is the Black agenda? Can we identify what the Black agenda is overall and in particular circumstances with us as a people? And so for us to be able to get close to a kumbaya, I think we have to keep asking the hard questions of what are we striving for, and are we on the same page? If not, are we creating safe spaces for us to discuss what that means for you and for me and for other people, and to be in dialogue about that?
And this is Charles on that too, and I don't think
I have a dream.
There is no kumbaya, and there never will be a kumbaya. And you know what? That's not such a bad thing. It's not a bad thing when you have so many different conflicts and tensions and contrasts. We all are living in different worlds and different universes and different perspectives, and we as Black people, we appreciate that because we've borne the disastrous brunt of that, right? But also, I think that it's time for us to just have a national conversation where it's okay for everyone to be comfortable about those different experiences and those different perspectives. And so, I mean, like when I, kind of going back to your earlier question, Nick, I'm the same. I'm like Solomon. If you're going to walk the walk, then you walk the walk everywhere, And so, I basically, when I'm on different platforms other than WURD or the Tribune, I'm the same Charles Ellison. And the way I feel is that, it's time for, because we are the country that we are, you're talking about making America great again. It was already, it is great because of all these different perspectives. It'd be dull if it wasn't. It is great because of all these different perspectives and all these different voices and all these different points of view that are being presented. And we need to also force other groups, we need to force white folks to appreciate that and embrace that. That's not such a bad thing. And so I don't think there should ever be any expectation that it's going to be perfect, that we're all going to be at the same table. We don't need to be. And I think that that's why a black media voice, even if, say, there was in some alternative universe, there was this perfect kind of kumbaya world, I think that's why black media is still essential. Any kind of media in any different community or any different demographic group, because we're growing up in different kinds of settings and different kinds of cultures, it's nothing wrong with, I mean, as long as you're not casting hate or violence or hostility at any other group or setting yourself up where you feel like you're superior to any other group, I don't think there's anything wrong with you embracing your own culture and also demanding that other people respect it. And so that's what we need to do as black people when we walk into different spaces, respect who we are. Respect the different perspectives that we're coming from, the different neighborhoods and the different cities and the different places and different settings that we grew up in.
I noticed Shamari had a response to something that was said. I wasn't sure.
It's the spirit of why I've been advocating for this host roundtable for a long time. So I'm glad to see it finally come together because of this moment.
We listen to you, man.
Because the idea that we have seven people. I don't know how many if we took a poll, but I'm one who never, from my perspective and the ancestor and the history that I honor, America ain't never been great. So it can't get in again. Because it ain't never got a first. But that's how we think, so to get back to your question though, it's an issue of frame control, which is going back to why black media and when I see red, black, and green, that means something to me, right? It's not just symbols. There's a substance under the symbols that comes from a place that we need to honor. And so for me, I've never been driven by this idea of anybody's kumbaya moment because it gives white supremacy too much power. Me being kumbaya with the people who almost cursed up this joint. Never that.
This is the
never that.
Free library.
How do we let that be the black star, the guiding star that we live our lives from? Right? We ain't even begin to touch how much of our African history and culture we don't even talk about on black media. We so busy trying to get equal and free and liberated and whatever. We ain't even done a microcosm of any work around what it means to be African descended on black media. We got to fight and create those spaces, kick doors open to have those conversations. So even though kumbaya ain't never coming, there's still a bigger thing that we need to do with this arc that we call WURD and that we call black media across this country because we don't even know what we don't know about who we really are. And we got to begin to scratch and kick to open up a door for those conversations. And every time we center our conversation and reaction to a fool like Donald J. Trump takes us that much further from who we are as African people and the real work of sovereignty and nation building and power that we really need to be discussing.
Well, let me answer this phone. Yeah, Secret Service, yes, he's still here. We got him.
He's the one with the dashiki. He's the one wearing the dashiki.
Let me remind everybody who we are, where we are, broadcasting live from the Free Library's beautiful Skyline Room as we celebrate Founders Day, and that is the memory of our founder, Dr. Walter P. Lomax, and all of the great work that has been done by WURD, which lives and moves and breathes in his legacy. We're glad that you can join us. We're having a panel discussion with all of the hosts of WURD. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got to tell you, you will never find a more brilliant discussion than the one that these folks are having right now.
More discussion.
Right now. We want to continue having it. In a few moments, we'll open the floor for questions for some of you. Let's talk about ownership. There's a lot of black media that really is not black media. It's owned by other people. Ownership is going way down. Someone mentioned it earlier before. There used to be 6,000 black-owned. There used to be 6,000. Now less than 100 black-owned radio stations, less than 100, and it's going down. Panel, what do we have to do to own more, to create ownership so that we not only have black voices or black faces, but you have black people who own it and it's operating from that perspective? Fair game for any of our panelists.
Well, one of the things that I do on my show is focus on black businesses. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that I did that is because, we talk about having a spiritual foundation. We talk about having a cultural foundation, an ethnic foundation, a racial foundation. We need to have an economic foundation in order for us to be a strong community. I mean, that's just real. Like, you know, we walk around talking about all this Africa stuff and ain't got no money. Like, come on, man. At some point, we have to focus on ownership. And that is why WURD is so important, because it is black owned. It gives us the latitude to address some issues, right, that we would not be able to address in the same way in other places with the same effect, right? So if I go to the Daily News and I write, you know, what I just wrote, or something else where people send me hate mail all week, and that's fine. It doesn't have the same effect as getting on the airwaves at WURD and saying, we need you at 1901 Vine Street on Friday. Look at the room. See, that's what I'm talking about. You know, we need to be able to focus on ownership so that we can then move the community forward from a strong economic foundation, right? Instead of going to people begging, talk about, man, I need $5, I need this, I need that. No, create your own, build your own. Like I said, the brother who started the Chicago Defender had 25 cents in 1905, and he became a millionaire because he focused. And so, you know, a lot of what we do, I think, has to be around learning how economics really works, right? That when they come in and they gentrify your community, if you're a renter, you got to go. That's the point. Point blank, you got to go because you can't afford the rent. But if you're an owner, you now have equity in your home. And you can pull the cash out of your home because that home you bought for $40,000 because some white folks moved in is now worth $500,000. Well, we have to focus on ownership. Ownership of our homes, ownership of our businesses, ownership of our communities, so that we can then move forward from a strong economic base.
And this is Vincent. Another thing we've got to do is spend our money well.
Yep.
We spend our money on a lot of frivolous stuff, black people. We spend our stuff on we make a lot of other people rich with fidget spinners and spinning rims and whatever
whatever spent.
You know, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we spend on that is unnecessary. And if you invested that in a bank account, stocks, mutual fund, what white folks do, we can do. There's the stock market just don't have a closed door that says only, you know, Hakeem, you know, only Johnny can spend in it and Hakeem can't. We've got to change the way that we spend. We have to support radio stations. A lot of reasons that we went from 6,000 to 100 is those radio stations couldn't afford to be on the air. And what happened? White media outlets knew their value, gobbled them up, and still continued to program to you. That's what they did. They still played the music. They still did everything you want. They were still out in the community, but it was a white guy who was getting all that money. But when a black person wanted the help of that, nobody. If Philadelphians and black folks want to help themselves, we got. Leon Sullivan said, "Build, baby, build."
This is Charles. This is Charles.
Real quick, because I want to make sure we get a couple of questions from the audience.
You can't really establish that economic foundation is important. It's essential. It's a core of what we do, and we need that. But you can't have that economic foundation without a change in mindset. I mean, there's going to have to be a change in mindset, and it's also a matter of confidence as well. We don't have a collective confidence in ourselves as people, and so then that ends up in leading to catastrophic economic situations, which we now find ourselves in, where there's like very limited independent black media ownership, like WURD. WURD is a fantastic model. It's not just a fantastic model because of what it's established in terms of the media space, but also in terms of the mindset and in terms of what we share each and every day, and what we're sharing now in terms of the psychology of confidence. And we don't have enough of that collectively as a people, as institutions, and we need to think of that confidence as being translated into power. So, I mean, once we have that mindset, I mean, let's just keep it real. I mean, our public schools, for example, particularly here in a city like Philadelphia, they're not teaching empowerment or confidence or black empowerment or black confidence. And so that's a problem. And so as a result, none of us are really able to realize that economic empowerment yet.
We've got to take a couple of questions from the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, if you can help me to thank our panelists for what they've shared thus far. And now we're going into the lightning round of questions. One of our interns, Jordan, has a microphone. We can probably get 3 questions in. We're asking that you would make them questions. You know, questions, something with a question mark at the end, and not long speeches, so that others can have an opportunity to ask the question. Please, sir.
Good afternoon.
It's on.
Yes. Your question?
Good afternoon. I would like to know, why do some black people, especially on TV, feel the need to speak up for Donald Trump? And at the convention the other night when he was speaking, there was a guy in the audience holding up a sign for Trump. Why do some black people feel the need to defend Trump, even though we know what he's about?
Because they paid him. Next question. Next question.
And he's not.
All right.
Greetings.
Greetings.
I have a question, but first of all, I want to say thank you for all this hosts here. And all of you do a very good job, and you build my vocabulary just by listening to you.
Indubitably.
But I used to be a morning person, I still am, and there was this host who came on in the morning, and I loved her vocabulary words that she used, that I got a stack of cards, and I would fill out the cards and use the dictionary to write them up.
Speaking to your microphone, sir, and let's get right to that question.
What I want to know, what I want to tell you is that I really appreciate Stephanie Renee's vocabulary usage. And the children should listen to WURD so that their vocabulary can grow. And I'm supposed to turn this into a question. So will you continue to do that? Especially those who wake me up in the morning.
Yes, we will use the dictionary for you. Yes, this is Vincent. Yes, we will.
I like to use big words like hippopotamus and things like that as often as I can. Question all the way to the right side of the auditorium.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jim Abram. I'm a deacon at Triumph Baptist Church. And
Amen.
I'm the Point Man Soldiers Heart Ministry. And my question to my young brothers and sisters.
Thank you, sir.
I need the whole panel to take note. Take note. This world belongs to us. You're young, you're strong, you're energetic, and everybody got a vocabulary that's out of sight. I love listening to WURD. Are you planning on being at WURD 30 years from now?
Man, I'm just trying to breathe 30 years from now, brother.
Will you have that same force? I just hope Jones live forever. All y'all, I hope y'all live forever.
Thank you.
And bring the word to us. We need that word. And we need to be chastised more. Stephanie? Yep.
Steph can chastise. All right, let's get our next question if we possibly can. Let's see. Any of our, especially if any of our WURD family members are out there who have a question.
Stand up.
I would like to know if there are going to be any serious, large voter registrations before the next time when the voting is so pitifully small in this area.
Eric Grimes is going to be leading our voter registration.
This is Vincent. I think one thing that we can say is we always work with the city commissioner's office as far as getting people registered to vote. We will continue to work with them. But here's the thing about Philadelphia. Philadelphia's got 1.5 million people. Most of Philadelphians are registered to vote.
Right.
You just don't come out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you might say, oh, Vincent, you need to register us. Well, here's the biggest thing, and I worked as a political person. People are registered, but they don't remember that they registered at their old house 5 times ago, and they're still registered there and didn't change their registration to their new place. So if Philadelphians want to influence stuff, you must vote.
And here's the other thing. This is Solomon. I did do a voter registration drive before the presidential election, and we went to locations around the city, and we registered people to vote. We needed more participation in that, but more than that, we needed people to come out. There's no way in the world, with Philadelphia having 1 of 6 voters in Pennsylvania, that Donald Trump should have won this state. I just got to be honest with you. There's no way in the world that should have happened, but it did, and everything happens for a reason. But when we do these things, We need you to participate. We need you to be in it, and we need you ultimately to vote.
Can I jump in that also?
We got 1 minute for a jump in, Steph.
Okay, just to say that for as much as we encourage everybody in our listening audience to use the technology, Philadelphia has been woefully behind the rest of the nation in using technology in order to empower people to vote and to register to vote. And now we're starting to catch up. So what we also need is, if you are determined to sit at home for most of this, you can still sit at home and register to vote. You can go online and handle that. So make sure that if we're going to be sitting on our behinds, that we're doing so purposefully and still getting things done.
So because I don't want my stance to be kind of just left at a joke.
1 minute thing.
And I really am serious about what I'm going to say, because I'm actually organizing the Unvote movement.
Oh gosh.
In martial arts and pretty much there's earth,
20 seconds.
There's air, there's fire, there's water, and we always leave out the fifth one, which is called void. One of the things you must learn in fighting is how to not be where your enemy thinks you're going to be. Right. And we as black people have not learned the art of the void. So we always think that our job is to support and jump in and support. And so we get this quantity thing going. Sometimes you got to make people miss you.
True.
Sometimes you got to make people miss you. So I'm not talking about apathy and laziness. I'm talking about with the art of strategic retreat. There's no war ever won that has not been preceded with a strategic retreat, where you regroup in the void, recenter, then come back strong.
And on that,
okay, I gotta say this.
That's a strategic blunder, though.
I gotta say this because that's harmful to our people. I gotta be honest.
Yeah, that's irresponsible.
To our
that's
people.
irresponsible. I mean, all due respect to Shamar, that's
I love you. That's harmful to our people.
Yeah, I mean, I
need to just say this: that in 1965. Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act in 1965. At that time, when he signed it, poverty in the black community was at 42%. In 2012, after Barack Obama's first term, after that Voting Rights Act culminated in the election of the first black president, our poverty rate was at 27%. Don't tell me that voting does not matter.
And ladies and gentlemen,
black people in the streets probably have more to do with that.
We will continue this discussion next year.
I can't.
At next year's Founders Day, we will continue this discussion, folks. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time for any other discussion. We want to thank all of our hosts, the brightest, the best, the most loquacious, the most intelligent. Charles Ellison, Steph Renee, Keaton Nichols, Solomon Jones, Mr. Eric Grimes, Thera Martin, and Mr. Vince Thompson.